High above the sweltering jungles of the Pacific, the sky seemed calm, but the tension was unbearable. Japanese fighter planes moved in precise formations, their engines roaring as they searched for American bombers. Below, the green canopy hid the chaos of war, the distant explosions, the smoke rising from burning villages, and the cries of soldiers struggling to survive. But in the sky above, an unseen force was watching, waiting. No one knew his name. To the Japanese pilots, he was nothing more than a shadow, a ghost, a threat that appeared suddenly and vanished just as fast. This ghost wasn't a hardened soldier from the city or a trained military family. He was a farm boy from Wisconsin, quiet and unassuming. A young man who spent his early years tending crops, chasing chickens, and learning to hunt in the woods. But the skills he learned in those simple days, patience, precision, and focus, would make him one of the deadliest pilots the world had ever seen. His name was Richard Bong. And by the end of the war he would record 40 confirmed aerial victories. 40 planes shot down in a war where every mission could have been his last. 40 planes that should have been impossible for someone so young, so inexperienced, and so ordinary. Yet he did it. He became a legend. He became the United States Ace of Aces, a title earned by skill, courage, and an unshakable calm under pressure. But how did a simple farm boy who had never even flown in a combat zone become such an unstoppable force in the skies? How did he survive hundreds of missions, facing some of the most skilled pilots in the world, in an aircraft that could kill him as easily as it could kill the enemy? That is the story we are about to explore. Richard Bong grew up far from the war. The quiet fields of Wisconsin were a world away from the fire and fury of the Pacific. He loved the outdoors, hunting small game with careful aim, and learning the art of patience. Every day he honed his focus, his ability to wait for the perfect moment. Little did he know, these simple lessons would later save his life and make him a master of aerial combat. When the war reached America's shores, Bong, like many of his generation, felt the call. The world was on fire, Europe consumed by the Nazi war machine, the Pacific under the brutal advance of the Japanese Empire. He enlisted in the Army Air Forces not for fame or glory but out of a love for flying. The first time he climbed into a cockpit, the young farm boy felt at home. The controls were no longer metal and wires, they were extensions of his own body. He could feel the plane respond to his every move, as if the aircraft and pilot were one. Even in training, Bong's talent was clear and dangerous. He flew loops, dives, and spins that no instructor would dare attempt. Over the Golden Gate Bridge, he performed daring maneuvers that made spectators gasp. Most cadets would have been grounded immediately for such recklessness. But Bong's superiors saw something different. They saw not arrogance but skill beyond measure, a natural mastery of flight that could not be taught. And so, instead of punishment, Bong was given a chance to become a weapon that could change the course of the war. He was assigned the P-38 Lightning, an aircraft as powerful and dangerous as the pilot himself. The P-38 was not easy to master. Twin engines, concentrated nose guns, incredible speed, and a tendency to behave unpredictably at high altitudes made it a machine that many feared. But Bong loved it. He became one with it. Every dive, every climb, every high-speed turn was executed with precision and purpose. By the time he was deployed to New Guinea, Bong was ready, but the enemies he faced were not. Japanese pilots had been fighting since 1937, trained in agile Mitsubishi Zero fighters that could outmaneuver almost any Allied plane in a dogfight. On paper, Bong, with just a handful of flight hours in combat, should have been an easy target. But he wasn't like other pilots. He didn't try to match the Zeros in their own game. He invented his own. His tactic was simple, brutal, and effective. First, he climbed above the enemy, taking advantage of the P-38's superior altitude performance. Then he converted that altitude into speed, diving down with terrifying precision. He unleashed a short, controlled burst of fire from the nose-mounted guns, devastating the enemy in seconds. And then he vanished, climbing back to safety, ready to strike again. To the Japanese, this flying phantom was terrifying. They called him, and his aircraft, the fork-tailed devil. They never knew when he would appear, only that when he did, death followed. As Bong began his first combat missions, the victories piled up. One bomber here, a Zero there. He was patient, precise, almost surgical in his approach. He wasn't just shooting planes, he was changing the rules of air combat, using his mind, his machine, and his skill to create a legacy that no one could ignore. And yet, the question remained, how could a quiet farm boy with nothing but determination and a love for flying become the most feared ace in the Pacific? How could one young man achieve 40 confirmed kills in the deadliest war the world had ever seen? That story begins here, in the skies above the Pacific, with the ghost of the jungle watching silently, striking with deadly precision, and vanishing before anyone could see him coming. A farm boy, a single plane, and 40 enemy fighters destroyed. How did this unlikely hero become America's deadliest ace? The answer lies in skill, courage, and the extraordinary journey of Richard Bong, a journey that is only just beginning. Richard Bong's story did not begin in the sky, it began in the quiet fields of Wisconsin. Born to a simple farming family, Bong grew up surrounded by the rhythm of nature, the rustling of cornfields, the call of birds at dawn, and the quiet discipline of farm life. As a boy, he learned responsibility, patience, and focus, qualities that would later save his life and shape him into one of the deadliest pilots the world would ever see. He spent his youth exploring the woods, hunting small game with a rifle, and practicing aim with a precision that bordered on obsession. Every day was a lesson in patience. Every missed shot was an opportunity to learn. His father often watched him with quiet pride, never fully realizing that the skills of the farm would one day make his son a weapon of war in the skies thousands of miles away. When war broke out across the globe, Richard Bong felt a calling stronger than any before. The world was burning, and the United States was preparing to enter a conflict unlike any other. The stories of Nazi conquest in Europe and Japanese expansion in the Pacific stirred a sense of duty in young men across the country. Bong, however, was not drawn to the glory of battle or the headlines of heroism. He was drawn by a love of flying, a freedom that could only be found in the open sky. He enlisted in the Army Air Force's Aviation Cadet Program, a rigorous path that demanded more than courage. It demanded instinct, discipline, and an understanding of a machine that could just as easily become a tomb as a protector. Bong excelled immediately. He was not merely a student of flight, he became a part of the plane itself. The P-38 Lightning, with its twin engines, sharp nose, and incredible speed, was a marvel of engineering, but it was also a beast to tame. Most cadets struggled with it, losing control or becoming too cautious. Bong thrived. Even during training, Bong's natural talent was unmistakable, and often reckless. He pushed the boundaries of what was allowed, performing daring maneuvers that shocked instructors and terrified spectators. He flew low over the streets of San Francisco, so close that people could see the rivets on the wings. He looped over the Golden Gate Bridge, testing the limits of both his courage and the aircraft's capabilities. These stunts were not mere showmanship, they were experiments, ways for Bong to understand the full potential of his plane, to push the envelope of physics and skill. His superiors were stunned. Most would have grounded him permanently for such dangerous acts. But one man saw beyond the recklessness. General George Kenney, a brilliant and stern commander responsible for the 5th Air Force, recognized the spark of genius in the young pilot. He saw confidence where others saw arrogance, mastery where others saw chaos. Instead of punishment, Kenney decided to harness Bong's talent, molding him into a weapon that could change the course of the war in the Pacific. Under Kenney's guidance, Bong continued his training but with a new purpose. He learned to fly in formation, to read the skies, to anticipate the enemy's moves, and to use his plane's strengths against their weaknesses. But more than skill, he developed instinct. He could feel the air, the speed, the tension in the aircraft, and make split-second decisions that others would never even consider. He was becoming more than a pilot, he was becoming a predator of the sky. The P-38 Lightning was both a blessing and a curse. Its twin engines gave it incredible speed and climbing ability, while its nose-mounted guns allowed for precise fire without the complex calculations required for wing-mounted weapons. But it was also unforgiving. High-speed dives could create dangerous shock waves on the wings, freezing the controls and sending pilots into fatal spins. Many had died trying to master it. Bong, however, embraced the challenge. He learned to respect the aircraft, to push it hard but wisely, turning potential danger into an advantage. By the time he was deployed to New Guinea, Bong was ready, not just to fight but to dominate. The jungles below hid a brutal war, with Japanese forces experienced, skilled, and determined to crush Allied advances. But Bong's skill, discipline, and unshakable calm set him apart. He did not fight like the others. He did not dive blindly into dogfights. He observed. He calculated. He waited for the perfect moment. Even his first missions showed a remarkable combination of patience and aggression. He did not chase enemy planes. He stalked them. He learned their habits, studied their formations, and waited for a single, perfect strike. One burst of fire, one precise attack, and the enemy would fall. He was efficient, almost surgical. Other pilots marveled at his approach, calling him methodical, precise, and deadly. But to Bong, it was just instinct, an extension of the skills honed on the farm and in training. Suspense built with every mission. The Japanese pilots began to notice a pattern, a ghost that appeared from nowhere and disappeared into the clouds. They called it, the fork-tailed devil. And Richard Bong was the master behind that name. By the end of his first months in combat, he had already begun to carve his place in history. But the war was far from over, and the battles ahead would test him in ways that no training or instinct could prepare him for. The question lingered, burning like the tropical sun over New Guinea: how far could a farm boy go? How many planes could one man bring down? And what price would he pay to reach the top? This was only the beginning of Richard Bong's journey, from the quiet fields of Wisconsin to the deadly skies of the Pacific, a journey that would change the course of aerial warfare forever. The sun rose over the dense jungles of New Guinea, painting the sky with streaks of orange and gold. On the ground, Allied soldiers prepared for another day of brutal fighting against the Japanese, who were determined to control the Pacific Islands. But high above the canopy in the vast expanse of sky, a different kind of battle was about to unfold, one that would mark the beginning of a legend. Second Lieutenant Richard Bong, the quiet farm boy from Wisconsin, climbed into his P-38 Lightning, feeling the familiar hum of the twin engines beneath him. This was no longer practice, no longer training. This was real combat, the moment when skill, courage, and instinct would be tested against some of the most experienced pilots in the world. The enemy pilots he faced were far from novices. The Japanese Zero fighter was a nimble and deadly aircraft, flown by battle-hardened veterans who had been fighting since 1937. They knew the skies of the Pacific intimately. They knew every trick in the book. On paper, Bong, a young pilot with only a few combat missions under his belt, stood little chance against them. But Richard Bong was not an ordinary pilot. He didn't fight by the rules. He invented his own rules. The P-38 Lightning was his ally. Its twin engines gave it incredible speed and climbing ability. Its 450 caliber machine guns and 120mm cannon were concentrated in the nose, meaning Bong didn't have to worry about lining up shots through wing convergence. Every bullet fired went exactly where he aimed. But more importantly, Bong knew how to use the P-38's strengths against the enemy's weaknesses. Instead of engaging in tight dogfights with the Zero, an almost suicidal strategy, Bong stayed high above the enemy, holding the altitude advantage. From this position he converted height into speed, diving down in a sudden burst of lethal energy. He fired short, precise bursts, striking the enemy with deadly accuracy, and then vanished back into the clouds. Hit and run. Strike and vanish. Efficiency over recklessness. On his first mission, Bong observed the enemy carefully. He learned their patterns, their formations, the way they reacted to incoming attacks. Other pilots often sprayed bullets in hope of a hit, wasting ammunition and risking their lives. Bong was different. He stalked his prey like he had hunted rabbits in the woods of Wisconsin. He waited for the perfect moment, a single clean shot that would decide life or death in seconds. Then it happened. The first Zero appeared, cutting through the sky like a silver dart. Bong dived, engines roaring, and unleashed a precise burst from his nose guns. Smoke erupted from the enemy fighter. Pieces of metal fell into the jungle below. Bong pulled up and climbed back into the sun, scanning for the next target. The Japanese pilots were stunned. No one had struck so quickly, so decisively, and then disappeared. Word began to spread among them. A ghost in the sky, a fighter they could not catch, an unseen hunter with a deadly P-38. They called it, the fork-tailed devil. Bong didn't care about the name. He cared about results. Every plane he shot down meant one less threat to Allied bombers and soldiers below. As the weeks passed, Bong's tactics became even more refined. He never engaged in horizontal dogfights, where the Zero had the advantage. He stayed above the enemy, forcing them into battles they could not win. He studied deflection shooting, firing not where the enemy was, but where it would be in the split second the bullets arrived. It was a skill few pilots mastered, yet Bong executed it as naturally as breathing. His victories began to accumulate. On one mission he shot down 2 enemy aircraft in a single dive, leaving his squadron mates in awe. Major Thomas Lynch, a seasoned ace, described Bong's flying as surgical, patient, precise, and ruthless. Every attack was calculated, every maneuver deliberate. There was no bravado, no reckless risk. Just deadly efficiency. But the danger was always present. The Pacific skies were unforgiving. Enemy pilots were skilled, and the jungle below offered no second chances. One miscalculation, a sharp turn at the wrong speed, a moment too slow on the trigger, could mean a fiery death. Bong understood this. He respected the danger but never feared it. Fear, he knew, would slow his reflexes, ruin his aim, and cost lives. Even as he grew in skill, the psychological weight of combat was heavy. Every kill was a victory, but it was also a reminder of the cost of war. Bong thought of the Japanese pilots as adversaries, not monsters, yet he could not allow hesitation. His role was clear: protect the bombers, safeguard the ground troops, and ensure victory for the Allies. Each mission reinforced his reputation. The quiet farm boy was becoming a living symbol of fear for the enemy and hope for his own side. By the end of his first months in combat, Bong had confirmed several kills, each more precise than the last. Reports from Japanese intelligence began to mention the fork-tailed devil attacking from above, a fighter they could neither catch nor predict. And Bong was only getting started. As the sun set over the jungles of New Guinea, the P-38 cut through the orange sky, its twin engines singing a song of freedom and death. Richard Bong looked down at the green canopy below, calm, focused, and ready for the next fight. He knew the skies were dangerous, but he also knew he had a gift, a combination of skill, instinct, and a deadly aircraft that could not be matched. The question lingered in the minds of his squadron and his enemies alike. How far could this farm boy go? How many more planes could he bring down? And what price would he pay to become the deadliest ace the Pacific had ever seen? This was the turning point. The quiet boy from Wisconsin was no longer just a pilot. He was a hunter, a master of the skies, and a legend in the making. The Pacific War had found its ghost, and it had no idea what was coming next. The skies over New Guinea were a deadly chessboard. Japanese planes moved in disciplined formations, confident in their training and experience. Yet, above them, a new force was beginning to dominate, a presence so fast, so precise, that even seasoned enemy pilots whispered about it with fear. This was Richard Bong, the farm boy turned hunter, the man who would soon be known as the fork-tailed devil. By now Bong had mastered the P-38 Lightning. Its twin engines roared with unrelenting power, and its nose-mounted guns were extensions of his own body. Unlike other pilots who wasted ammunition with long bursts, Bong fired short, precise shots. He studied deflection, speed, and angles so meticulously that every round counted. Each burst meant a guaranteed kill, or as close to guaranteed as war could allow. The first time the Japanese pilots saw the P-38 diving from the sun, shooting with surgical precision, and then disappearing as quickly as it appeared, they were stunned. No one had ever fought like this before. Stories spread among the enemy ranks about a twin-tailed demon that appeared from nowhere. A hunter that struck silently, without warning, and vanished before retaliation was possible. The fork-tailed devil was born, not a name given lightly but one earned through fear and respect. Bong's methods were revolutionary. Where other pilots engaged in slow, close-range dogfights, he avoided them entirely. He climbed above, waited for the perfect moment, and attacked. Speed and height were his allies, patience was his weapon, and precision was his code. He wasn't reckless, he was strategic. And with every mission his reputation grew. One mission in early 1943 would cement his legend. Bong and his squadron were escorting a formation of bombers over a heavily defended Japanese position. Enemy fighters were waiting, ready to rip apart the vulnerable planes. Most Allied pilots would have fought reactively, but Bong had a plan. He climbed above the Japanese formation, hidden by the sun. He waited. Then, with pinpoint timing, he dove into the enemy bombers, his guns blazing in short, deadly bursts. Bomber after bomber erupted in flames. The Japanese fighters scrambled, trying to chase him, but he was already gone, climbing back into the clouds. The bomber crews below looked up in awe, seeing a ghost protect them from certain destruction. With every mission his victory count climbed. By mid-1943 Bong had become an ace, and not just any ace. He was quickly becoming America's deadliest pilot in the Pacific. Yet he remained quiet, almost invisible outside the cockpit. There were no grand speeches, no public displays of heroism. He let his flying do the talking. Major Thomas Lynch, a decorated veteran, described Bong's approach as surgical. Each move was calculated. Nothing wasted. No bullets fired in hope. Every action had purpose. Even in chaos, Bong remained calm, analyzing, calculating, striking only when success was certain. It was a stark contrast to the frantic, sometimes reckless attacks of other pilots. The Japanese soon realized that the fork-tailed devil wasn't just a skilled pilot, he was a tactician. His attacks were sudden and unexpected, his speed unmatched, and his ability to vanish into the sun made him untouchable. Enemy reports filled with frustration. Formations disrupted, bombers destroyed, pilots confused and terrified. They didn't know when or where he would strike next. To them he was a ghost, a nightmare in the sky. But Bong's genius was not only in killing enemy planes, it was in protecting his own forces. Every bomber he escorted, every squadron he flew with benefited from his presence. He shielded them from enemy fighters, creating openings for the bombers to complete their missions. He wasn't seeking fame or recognition. His goal was efficiency and survival, both for himself and for the crews he protected. As his fame spread among Allied forces, Bong became a symbol of hope. Soldiers on the ground would look to the skies, hoping to see the P-38 with Marge painted on its nose, a quiet reassurance that help had arrived. To the Japanese, he became a symbol of fear, the fork-tailed devil they could neither catch nor predict. Yet, despite all the victories, Bong never let the adulation affect him. He remained humble, almost introverted, focused on the next mission, the next target, the next challenge. Fame did not change his approach, it sharpened his focus. He knew that every mission could be his last. He also knew that his skill, discipline, and understanding of the P-38 were what kept him alive when others would have fallen. By the end of 1943, Richard Bong had 21 confirmed victories. The numbers were staggering. Each one represented not only a kill but countless lives saved among Allied forces. His story traveled fast, even reaching the United States, where newspapers began celebrating the quiet farm boy from Wisconsin who had become America's ace. But Bong's journey was far from over. He had faced the best pilots Japan had to offer, and he had emerged victorious. Ahead lay even deadlier missions, tougher enemies, and the chance to break records that no pilot had ever dreamed of achieving. The fork-tailed devil was only beginning to write his legend in the skies of the Pacific. And as the sun set over the islands, painting the horizon with gold and crimson, Bong climbed higher, scanning the skies, waiting for his next target. Calm, precise, unstoppable. A farm boy no longer. A hunter. A protector. A legend. The question now was no longer if he would succeed, it was how far could he go before the war finally caught up with him? By the end of 1943, Richard Bong's name was on everyone's lips. Newspapers across the United States celebrated the quiet farm boy who had become America's deadliest ace in the Pacific. His confirmed kills had reached 21, a staggering number that put him at the top of the Allied pilots' ranks. But fame brought a new challenge, one that Bong had never trained for. General George Kenney, the commander who had recognized Bong's extraordinary talent, made a difficult decision. The young ace was to be sent back to the United States for a war bond tour. To the generals it made perfect sense. Bong's image would inspire a weary nation, encouraging Americans to support the war effort financially. To Bong, however, it was an almost unbearable punishment. He felt a deep sense of duty to his squadron and the soldiers on the ground. He did not seek recognition. He sought victory in the sky, and being grounded felt like a betrayal of everything he had worked for. Yet, even on American soil, Bong's legend only grew. Crowds cheered as he visited cities from New York to Los Angeles. Children waved flags, journalists snapped photos, and radio announcers spoke of the farm boy who had become a living ghost in the Pacific. Everywhere he went, people wanted to shake the hand of the man who had killed more Japanese planes than almost any other pilot. He was humble, almost uncomfortable with the attention, always redirecting the praise to his fellow pilots and the plane that had made it all possible. Despite the celebrations, Bong's heart remained in the Pacific. He wrote letters to his sweetheart, Marge Vattendahl, expressing his frustration at being pulled away from the front lines. He pleaded with General Kenney to allow him to return to combat. His letters were persistent, almost desperate, reflecting a man whose sense of duty outweighed fear, pride, and personal safety. Finally, in March 1944, his request was granted. Bong returned to New Guinea, but this time he was not the same young pilot who had first faced enemy fire. He was more experienced, more confident, and now flying the upgraded P-38J Lightning, a refined version of the aircraft that had made him a legend. The new P-38 had improved engines, better maneuverability, and enhanced stability at high speeds. In Bong's hands, it was not just a plane, it was a weapon of unmatched precision. The war had changed during his absence. Many of Japan's veteran pilots had been lost in battle, replaced by younger, less experienced men. Bong's experience gap gave him a significant advantage. His tactics evolved, becoming even more daring. He perfected head-on attacks, a maneuver that required nerves of steel. Many pilots would have broken off, terrified of mid-air collisions. Bong held his course, eyes fixed on the enemy, waiting until the very last moment to fire. Closing speeds often exceeded 800 miles per hour, giving him a window of less than a second to strike. In June 1944, Bong's skill reached new heights. On one mission he shot down his 27th and 28th enemy aircraft, surpassing the World War I record of 26 victories held by Eddie Rickenbacker. For a farm boy from Wisconsin, this was unimaginable. For the Allies it was historic. Bong had officially become America's greatest living fighter ace. Yet, his success came with new restrictions. General Kenny, understanding Bong's value as a symbol of hope and morale, prohibited him from routine combat missions. Bong was to fly only high-priority missions and serve as a flight leader, directing battles rather than engaging recklessly. To most pilots this would have been a relief. To Bong it was frustrating. He wanted to be in the thick of the fight, protecting his squadron and proving his skill in every engagement. Even under these restrictions, Bong continued to achieve the impossible. His missions were surgical strikes against enemy bombers and fighters. He used the sun, altitude, and superior speed to strike with lethal efficiency. The Japanese began to fear his presence more than ever. Reports described sudden high-speed attacks from the sky, pilots disappearing in bursts of fire, and the ghostly P-38 climbing back into the sun before anyone could retaliate. The fork-tailed devil was now a nightmare of strategy and precision, not just skill. In October 1944, during a critical mission over Balik Papan, Borneo, Bong faced one of the most intense air battles of his career. Japanese forces threw everything at the American formation, desperate to protect vital oil refineries. Bong led his squadron with expert precision. He attacked enemy bombers directly, ignoring the more agile Zeros, and fired deadly bursts that tore aircraft apart. Then, in a terrifying moment, an enemy fighter hit his P-38, destroying one engine. Most pilots would have disengaged immediately. Bong did not. On a single engine, with fire and smoke billowing from his plane, he banked into the dogfight, shot down another enemy fighter, and then safely returned to base hundreds of miles away. This mission cemented his reputation as fearless and unbreakable. Not only was Bong the deadliest ace, he was also a protector of lives. A pilot whose precision saved countless Allied bombers and crews. His tally continued to rise, 35, 36, 38 victories, and by December 1944 he reached 40 confirmed aerial kills, a record that has never been broken. Richard Bong was more than a fighter pilot. He was a symbol of courage, discipline, and unmatched skill. The quiet farm boy from Wisconsin had become America's unkillable ace, a legend in his own time, whose story would inspire generations long after the war ended. But even legends have limits, and the skies held one final challenge for Bong. A challenge that would test not just his skill but his luck, timing, and the very future of aviation itself. By early 1945, Richard Bong had become a living legend. With 40 confirmed kills, he was officially the deadliest American fighter pilot in history. Soldiers on the ground looked to the sky for hope, bombers flew more confidently under his protection, and even enemy pilots feared the ghostly presence of the fork-tailed devil. Yet for Bong the war was far from over. He was restless. Fame and accolades could not replace the thrill and responsibility of combat. He wanted to fly, to lead, and to fight, not sit in parades or pose for photographs. After the war in the Pacific was drawing closer to an end, Bong received a new assignment: test pilot for America's first operational jet fighter, the P-80 Shooting Star. This sleek, revolutionary aircraft represented the future of aviation. A new era where piston engines would be replaced by jet propulsion, pushing speeds and technology to unimaginable limits. For Bong it was both a challenge and an opportunity. He had mastered the most complex piston engine fighter, the P-38 Lightning, and now he would explore the unknown frontier of jet flight. The P-80 was unlike anything Bong had flown before. Without a propeller, without torque, it relied on raw jet thrust. Its behavior in the air was unpredictable at low altitudes and high speeds. Landing required precision, reflexes, and nerves of steel. Bong approached the jet with the same meticulous attention to detail he had applied in combat. He studied every system, every control, every potential hazard. He respected the machine, understanding that mastery would come only with patience and skill. For several months, Bong pushed the P-80 to its limits. He logged countless flight hours, tested the aircraft under extreme conditions, and provided feedback to engineers that shaped the future of American jet aviation. He became a pioneer, a student of the machine, exploring uncharted territory where failure could mean instant death. Yet even in this new role, his mind often drifted to the Pacific, to the battles, the bombers, and the men who still relied on skill and courage to survive. Then came August 6, 1945, a day that would become etched in history for reasons Bong could never have imagined. It was a routine test flight at the Lockheed Air Terminal in Burbank, California. The sun was bright, the sky clear. For Major Richard Bong, it was just another day at work, or so it seemed. He completed his pre-flight checks, climbed into the cockpit of the P-80 and prepared for takeoff. The engines roared to life, spooling up with the piercing scream of a jet. Bong taxied onto the runway, pushed forward on the throttle and lifted into the air. Everything initially went as planned. The jet accelerated smoothly, climbed gracefully, and responded to his commands with incredible precision. Bong felt at home, confident, in control. But fate can be cruel even for the most skilled pilots. Moments after takeoff, a critical fuel pump failed, starving the engine. The P-80 flamed out at critically low altitude, leaving Bong with only seconds to react. For a man who had survived hundreds of combat missions, faced swarms of enemy fighters and landed crippled planes, this was a fight unlike any he had faced before. Gravity was unforgiving, the earth rushed up, and there was no room for error. Bong attempted every emergency procedure he knew. He tried to restart the engine, attempted to glide the powerless jet toward the runway, and even prepared to bail out. But there was not enough altitude. Time ran out. The jet crashed into an open field and exploded in a fiery inferno. Major Richard Ira Bong, America's greatest fighter ace, was killed instantly at the age of 24. The tragedy was profound. On the very same day, half a world away, a single B-29 bomber, the Enola Gay, dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima, changing the course of history. While the world watched the dawn of the atomic age, news of Bong's death was buried, a quiet tragedy overshadowed by the monumental events of the day. Richard Bong's legacy, however, was immortal. His record of 40 confirmed kills and 200 combat missions has never been broken, and it is unlikely it ever will be. He had mastered the art of aerial warfare, combining instinct, discipline, and precision in a way that redefined what was possible. He was not reckless, not a daredevil seeking glory. He was a guardian of lives, a tactical genius who protected bombers, led his squadron with unshakable calm, and fought with a combination of science, skill, and courage. Even in death, Bong's story inspired generations. Pilots who followed studied his techniques, engineers revered his insight into aircraft performance, and the nation remembered the quiet farm boy who had conquered the skies. At the Richard Bong Veterans Historical Center in Wisconsin, his Medal of Honor rests as a testament to bravery. A restored P-38, bearing the name Marge on its nose, stands silently, a reminder of the man and the machine that made him a legend. Richard Bong's life was short, his victories extraordinary, and his story a testament to what one individual, driven by skill, determination, and a quiet courage, can achieve. He was the ace of aces, the fork-tailed devil, the unbreakable hunter of the skies, and though his final flight ended in tragedy, his legend will soar forever. The skies over the Pacific are quiet now. The dense jungles, the islands, and the airfields where battles raged have long since returned to silence. Yet the story of Richard Ira Bong, the quiet farm boy from Wisconsin, remains louder than ever. 40 confirmed kills, 200 missions, and a record of aerial precision and courage that has never been broken. These are the numbers. But the real story lies deeper, in the man, his mind, and the extraordinary skill that made him America's deadliest fighter ace. Bong's achievements were not born from arrogance or desire for fame. He did not seek recognition. His drive came from discipline, calculation, and a profound sense of duty. From the moment he first climbed into the cockpit of a P-38 Lightning, Bong understood that flying was more than a skill, it was life and death. He treated the aircraft not as a machine, but as an extension of himself. Every maneuver, every climb, every attack was executed with the precision of a master craftsman. The legend of the fork-tailed devil was forged not in reckless dogfights, but in patience, planning, and brilliance. Bong's tactics were years ahead of their time. He avoided turning battles with nimble Japanese Zeros, instead using altitude, speed, and surprise to dictate the terms of every engagement. He was methodical, efficient, and lethal. His gun camera footage, later studied by military experts, revealed a level of precision that was breathtaking. Bong didn't rely on luck. He relied on skill, mathematics, and instinct honed by years of training and a life spent hunting and observing nature. Even today, his approach remains a model for fighter pilots. The principles he pioneered, energy management, positioning, and decisive firepower, became the foundation of American air combat tactics. In essence, Richard Bong changed the way air battles were fought. His methods saved countless lives, protected bomber crews, and ensured that American forces could achieve their objectives with minimal losses. Yet Bong was more than a tactical genius. He was a man of humility, focus, and quiet courage. Fame never swayed him. He did not relish parades, speeches, or medals. When awarded the Medal of Honor, he wore it with modesty, uncomfortable with the attention it brought. His letters to Marge Vatndal, his sweetheart and later wife, reveal a man more concerned with duty and responsibility than personal glory. His life was tragically short. At just 24 years old, Bong died in the cockpit of a P-80 Shooting Star, America's first operational jet fighter. In a cruel twist of fate, he perished on the very day the atomic age began, overshadowed by the detonation over Hiroshima. Yet, while history may have briefly overlooked his death, it could never erase his impact. Bong's story is one of courage, mastery, and an almost supernatural precision in the face of danger. The legacy of Richard Bong endures not only in records and medals but in the inspiration he provides to generations of pilots, historians, and ordinary people alike. He showed that skill, discipline, and focus can make a single person extraordinary, even in the chaos of war. A quiet farm boy became a symbol of hope, a protector of lives, and a relentless force that the enemy could neither predict nor defeat. At the Richard Bong Veterans Historical Center in Wisconsin, visitors stand before a restored P-38 Lightning, its nose proudly bearing the name Marge. It is more than a plane, it is a testament to a young man who defied odds, challenged the enemy, and left a mark that no one can forget. The Medal of Honor displayed nearby tells the story of valor, but it is the quiet determination, courage, and genius of Richard Bong that truly define his legacy. Even decades later, the record of 40 confirmed aerial victories remains untouchable. Modern air combat, dominated by radar, missiles, and long-range engagements, cannot replicate the close-range dogfights where Bong excelled. His era, the era of the gunslinging ace, is over, but his legend continues to soar, reminding us of a time when one man, one plane, and one extraordinary mind could change the course of war. Richard Bong, the farm boy from Wisconsin, is gone, but the fork-tailed devil lives on, not in smoke and fire but in history, memory, and the skies themselves. A symbol of precision, courage, and an unbreakable spirit. A legend whose story will never fade, whose record will never be broken, and whose life continues to inspire all who dare to reach for greatness. In the end, the question is not how many planes he shot down, nor how many medals he earned. The question is, how far can courage, skill, and determination take one person? Richard Bong answered that question with every flight, every battle, and every heartbeat in the cockpit. The quiet farm boy became a living legend, a guardian of the skies and a hero for all time.